Hello, Aries. This is a forecast for Aries rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Aries, your ruling planet Mars has stationed retrograde and will return to Taurus by mid-month. Remember, this is sidereal astrology. So from Gemini back to Taurus, this means from your third sign back to your second whole sign, Taurus. And this is very much about how you communicate what you want, but also figuring out what you want, what's important to you, what do you value. And ultimately, Mars is retrograde through your second house of values and worth and self-worth. Obviously suggests that this is a time you'd be looking at your own self-worth and self-value and self-confidence as well. So the second house is very much about things that make you feel secure and safe and valued. And so finances, family, all of those kinds of things, resources are going to be under the spotlight. A lot of energy that can be redirected now in putting these things to the test in many ways. Mars retrograde in your second sign, Taurus, is about compromise on the one hand, but at the same time Mars is all about going for something that you want to go for. And because it's retrograde, it's not necessarily something that you're going for that's new. It's very much about going back to something that used to give you a sense of this kind of security. So in any way, going back to something, reorganizing your finances perhaps over this period as Mars returns to your second sign. It will do so by November 13th. It's going to start the month in November in your third sign, Gemini. So it's an important time to be very mindful of how you're communicating for sure. And also, again, what you're going for and what you want and how you go about getting what you want. That's third sign. And because it's Gemini, third sign with Mars, and because these two don't mix very well together, it's important that you say what you need to say, but obviously that you don't overstate something or that you don't bite your lip also to the point where then you erupt and, have an argument that is really unnecessary if you were to just be clear about what you want. But again, because it's retrograde, Mars might not be very clear. You might not be very clear about what you're going for. The other thing to note is that the last square is starting to break up between Saturn and Uranus. Uranus in your sign, Rahu, the North Node in your sign, both here, shaking you up in many ways and changing who you think you are and how you present. And because this is in a direct conflict, in contrast to Saturn, with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn for the last couple of years, it's been a bit of a challenge for you in terms of this new you that's being born out of this old way of doing things. 10th house is career in a broader perspective, but even just looking at it as how you take action. So Saturn in your 10th house in the last 2 years has asked you to really look at that and how you might be able to go about that differently. How do you do anything? How do you work? Yes, but also how do you do anything? How do you take any action? So that again, because you're going through so much change in your work likely or in how you do things, that is then obviously challenging you in terms of who you're becoming. And there's this contrast that's going on, but it's starting to break up now in November. And you, by the new year, will be able to manage this better. Until the new year, of course, this is kind of like slow easing of this, again, conflict potentially, at least a contrast between the new you and this old way of doing things. The other thing to note is that there's a lot going on in your seventh house. So you're going through a lot of personal changes, quite obviously, Aries. And one of those is that your partner and your relationship to your partner or any other is going through a lot of changes also, most likely. That's because we just had an eclipse in Libra on the 25th of October, and we're going to have a total lunar eclipse in your sign, Aries, on the 8th of November. So until the 8th of November, it might feel like things are sort of getting ramped up and there's an urgency about things. Maybe you feel an urgency to make a decision about something. The advice is obviously with an eclipse, perhaps not to. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but certainly knowing that the energy is kind of a bit all over the place, and feeling that urgency isn't necessarily reflective of the need to actually do anything. It's just reflective of your own sense of urgency. And to look at this more rationally is probably going to be more helpful, because eclipses are not rational. They feel more irrational. And so changes that are going on with you and your partner will be, shaking things up in a big way, and then making more personal changes come about for you personally, again, by that full moon total lunar eclipse by November 8th. So we have the sun in your seventh sign. A lot of emphasis on the seventh sign, your relationship right now with the sun and your ruler, and the seventh ruler, Venus, and Mercury, and the south node of the moon. And so all of these have to cross the south node in November, in the first week of November, before that total lunar eclipse in your sign. So it means that, Aries, you're probably going through a lot of changes in your relationship, and you're probably having to work a lot of things out, whether it's through finances, going for what you want, your work, your day-to-day life, how you communicate with each other. All of these things are important. Your creative self-expression, all of these things are going through a big change right now because of the eclipse, as the sun, Venus firstly, then the sun, then Mercury, all both go through this south node. So it's definitely a churning. It's like a process. It's like maybe even a washing machine spin. It's like, it feels like everything is going through a bit of a change. And that leading to that full moon, which I'll show you now, will be an important time. So let me bring it forward to that full moon on the 8th of November. This is it here. We have the moon, obviously opposite the sun. It's a full moon, and it's totally eclipsed by Rahu, the north node of the moon, and exactly conjunct Uranus in your sign. So this shows that there's a lot of change that's happening in your life, and in relation to your home life and relationships, of course, and financially, and all of those things are having a big impact on you. And because this full moon is in a square to Saturn, yet again, Saturn now having stationed in your 10th sign of work, it means there's a lot in a spin at the moment, Aries, I would imagine. And because these key areas of your chart, the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th, all like the key areas of your life, the four pillars of your life, really, yourself, your home, your relationships, your career, are going through such a tailspin, most likely because of this upcoming eclipse, and how that impacts you very personally. It's important to take your time with this, slow down in the beginning of November, I would say, and just allow it to kind of do its thing without getting too wrapped up in all of it. It's likely that there will be a lot of mental fluctuations going on. That's what the eclipses represent, literally the churning effect that can happen, and weighing all the pros and cons, all of that. But, again, I'd question, is it really necessary to make a decision about any of this right now? Possibly not. Even if you feel that it's urgent, it might be a good time to just kind of sit back on it a bit more. So that's the full moon on the 8th. If I bring it forward 2 weeks, and I'll show you the new moon, which is in Scorpio. Pardon me. Let's keep going forward here. I want to bring it back to your rising sign here. And the full moon is in Scorpio. So the full moon is on the 23rd of November. It's a new moon. Sorry, the new moon is a new moon in Scorpio. And it's a new moon, and it's a debilitated moon. So it's a dark moon, and it's in its weakest sign. So probably not the most uplifting of lunations, shall we say. Venus and Mercury are close by, also in exact conjunction in Scorpio, while Mars, which rules Scorpio, is opposite in Taurus, retrograde. Jupiter itself is stationing on the day later that day. So there are quite a few complexities going on at the end of November, but there's some positive attributes to this as well that you might not see initially. And one of those is that Mars in Taurus is exchanging with Venus in Scorpio. As soon as Mars moves back on the 13th, we have Mars now exchanging signs with Venus. So it's like putting Venus in Taurus and Mars in Scorpio. So in other words, this is actually ultimately a better situation. Yes, it does mean that you're having to kind of negotiate finances with your partner in a big way. Second and eighth houses are impacted here with your Lord and your seventh Lord. So there's definitely a lot of having to negotiate a lot of things here now that could be quite complex, but there is also then the potential of negotiating. And so this new moon then in Scorpio is this reset in this dark time of the year. Let's face it, it is the darkest time of the year in many ways. We're coming out of the darkest time after the sun moves into Scorpio in one way. But then the new moon in Scorpio, which is the moon stabilitated sign. We've already had the sun stabilitated sign in Libra, and then until the middle of November. And now we have the moon's weakest sign on the new moon, the end of November. Once we get through all of this, the dark sun, the dark moon, all of that, things can look brighter after this period for sure into December. But for now in November, I think could be quite dark. And because this is a new moon, your eighth sign, which is very much hidden also in dark, you might say in quality, while its ruler Mars is retrograde, your ruler Mars retrograde, you're having to negotiate some tricky things here. And so it might make you feel a bit vulnerable, a bit uncertain about the changes that are happening or that have to happen. You might be a bit uncertain about making them, though, even though they need to be made or they are happening. And so this new moon on the 23rd is an important time to check within in yourself to make the most appropriate change for you personally. And because Jupiter has just stationed direct in a trine to this new moon in Pisces in your 12th sign, it is very much a time to connect within to something more meaningful beyond all of the noise of all of these transits. Because Jupiter's there in the background all of this time, slowing down in November, stationing by the 23rd, and this new moon, this reset, really getting you to really completely recalibrate everything and what's meaningful in your life moving forward, and to connect with that something meaningful or purposeful, to be able to, be clear about what your next stage is, your next step is. So I hope that's been of help, Aries. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Taurus. This is a forecast for Taurus rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Taurus, Venus, your ruler, is going through a process right now. It has come out of its debilitation, at least in Virgo, moving through its own sign, Libra, your sixth sign, your everyday life and work routines and health regimes. But it's going through this process because it's combust. It has disappeared behind the sun. It's still in combustion, in a deep combustion in November, and won't reappear until the new year. So you're definitely having to go through this process. And although there's something which I'll show you now upcoming that's more helpful, until then, until mid-November, it's quite a complex time for you, I imagine, Taurus. Together with the fact that we have now the eclipses, we had the eclipse in Libra in your sixth sign on the 25th of October. And then on the 8th of November, we have a total lunar eclipse in your 12th sign. So you're having to negotiate some everyday stuff with learning to let go of some things that need to be just let go of and to start again and to have some resolution and surrender around some things that you really can't really control fully, perhaps, or you might feel like things are out of control in a way because the eclipses often feel that way. And at the same time, things might feel urgent and that you need to make a decision about things. And yet I would just ask yourself, do you really need to? Because eclipses have that urgency, but they don't have that kind of clarity forthcoming. And until they clear, until the kind of the shadows pass, then there won't be that clarity forthcoming. And so until the middle of November, I would say at least there might not be this kind of clarity. So like I said, Venus as well anyway is combust, your ruler, and it's moving through Libra. But then as soon as it makes it to Scorpio, we're looking at a better situation because we'll have Venus, your ruler, in Scorpio, and Mars having returned to Taurus, your sign, exchanging signs. So I'm going to show you that after the full moon and eclipse. And that's a better situation, really. Although it's quite complex, it can show that there's this potential compromise. And, two planets exchanging signs like that, and the first and seventh signs in your case, is very much about you negotiating with other people and, having a better time of it, I would say. So let me bring it forward to the 8th, which is the full moon. This is a full moon in your 12th sign. So after we seen the eclipse, the solar eclipse on the 25th of October, in your 6th sign, very much about your everyday life and how your life works or not, and maybe things aren't working and you have to recalibrate all of that and readjust and make some adjustments around your home life as well, because it's the sun, your fourth lord, that's being eclipsed by the moon, your third lord. So it's like making an effort in making some changes around your home and your everyday life. But now 2 weeks later, we have the 8th of November eclipse, which is kind of culmination point or resolution to all of these issues, and sort of the winding up or winding down of these issues. But it might feel like everything's wound up for a while, especially leading up to the 8th of November with the full moon totally eclipsed by Rahu, the North Node, and they're exactly conjunct Uranus in your 12th sign. While Mars itself, which rules the full moon, is retrograde and about to move back into your sign. It's quite complex, and you're kind of there in between all of this with Mars on one side and the full moon eclipsed on the other. So you might feel, the intensity of this emotionally. You might have this sense of, needing to kind of let go of the intensity for a while in some healthy way. The third lord, the moon, in the 12th house, eclipsed by Rahu, sun opposite, in the 6th house. Getting a balance right between your everyday life and things that you can do and make improvements in versus just letting go of all the details and just not worrying about and stressing about things will be important at this time. And because it's a full moon in your 12th sign, I think more so the kind of need for resolution and surrender and resolve here would be, around these issues, probably more apparent by the 8th, certainly after the 8th, when the clouds part, we might say, the shadow drifts from this moon. So Mars then is going to go into your sign by the 13th, or return to your sign. This therefore shows that, there's some, and Mars rules the 12th sign where we had this eclipse. So there's definitely some like give and take going on here, something that you need to surrender. And on the one hand, and because Mars retrograde anyway feels like that, it's like if you're not, then it's like pushing against something that's just not budging right now. And especially if it were your partner, in any way dealing with a partner, a lot of patience is required during this period, with Mars returning to your sign and stationing until mid-January. So there's quite a long haul for this one, really. From mid-November until mid-January, you've got 2 months of this Mars retrograding in your sign. So be especially patient, I would say, with any partners, any other at all, actually, any dealing with anyone else, I would say. Now, the good news is that Venus, your ruler, is in Scorpio. So it actually means that they're exchanging signs. So it's almost as if you put Venus in Taurus and Mars in Scorpio because they're in each other's signs. So it's like, imagine if you were in someone else's house and they were in your house, you're more likely to going to cooperate because you know that they're in your house while you're in their house, right? So like this swap that goes on between Mars and Venus, although they don't always get along, in this case they're forced to get along perhaps, and there's a compromise that's here. The potential is there. So this ultimately means that you can come out on top by negotiating with other people, and so that can be a really positive thing ultimately. It is only, of course, while Venus is in Scorpio, of course, because it will move on. But at least for now, from the 13th of November, at least, we have this kind of more compromising tone. Let me bring it then to the new moon. The new moon is in your 7th sign. This is an important new moon for you. This is an important new moon, full stop. It's the last sort of dark phase, really, of the year. We've had the sun already debilitated and eclipsed in the dark phase of Libra. Now we're having the moon darkened in its debilitation sign Scorpio for this new moon on the 23rd. And although there are other positive attributes to this as well, which I'll go into now in a minute, it is a dark time. But in the darkness, this is a reset, and especially in your relationships, Taurus. So there's something that can be negotiated here, again, with the Mars-Venus exchange, that you can improve your relationships in some way and like make an intention around this dark time. And whatever way that is appearing in your life, whatever darkness that is manifesting in your life, it might be doubt, it might be fear, it might be whatever it might be, there's an intention that you can make even in this darkest, what appears dark time. At the same time, Jupiter is actually stationing direct in your 11th sign and aspecting this new moon. So it's an important time to also recognize this key shift that's happening internally around even the more noisy transits that are going on, that there is that stillness within you that you can become more clear about how to move forward with your bigger plans. Jupiter stationing in your 11th house is very much about being clear about what you want in life, the bigger plans that you have, your ambitions in life, your goals in life. and more meaningful and purposeful goals, especially with Jupiter in your 11th sign. Friendships as well, and networks and associations of any kind are 11th house. So looking at how you connect more with your group. This has a say in this new moon in your 7th sign. And of course, that's what 7th sign and 11th sign have in common. It's all about like engaging with other people. And so how you do that and your intention behind that, it will be important, and how you connect within to your own inner guide, as it were, first will be important in terms of then connecting with other people. And as Jupiter starts to move forward now after this new moon, it is a good time to connect, or to be clear at least about your connections and what's important to you moving forward. The other thing to say is that Saturn and Pluto both have stationed already in October, and they're now moving forward and out of this square with Uranus. Though they are still in a square, they're not tightly in this square at least. And so at least it starts breaking up in November, and then December even more so. And then by January, Saturn moves on. So in terms of this square, which has been very problematic really all year and all last year, this kind of new thing that needs to be born, that you may kind of have this sense of not being clear about, while at the same time, these changing beliefs that are, happening in you as well, Taurus. This is all 9th and 12th sign. So it's like, what do you believe is possible? It's just as important to rid yourself of beliefs that are no longer useful. And that's really the key signature of this Saturn Uranus square for the last couple of years. So there's definitely some things to change now and to move forward with these bigger changes, with Saturn and Pluto moving forward, and now in November, Jupiter moving forward. December, Neptune will move forward, and all of these planets are moving forward. The only planet that isn't moving forward until mid-January, like I said, is Mars. And again, the partner, likely some reassessment, reconnecting maybe even to an old partner, or rethinking about how you are connecting to any other, will be one of the major themes of Mars retrograde in Taurus, in your sign. And at the same time, one thing I'll leave it with is that sense of Mars retrograde in your sign, your rising sign or moon sign, but especially rising sign, the excess energy that maybe doesn't have anywhere clear to go. And how do you find an outlet for that energy that's building up and building up? And it might feel actually the opposite. It might feel like it's dropping down because there's no clear outlet for it. And if there isn't a clear outlet for it, that's when problems can happen with Mars, that it's all this kind of energy that builds up into this kind of sense of angst or frustration that needs some sort of outlet, and we'll find it in some way, whatever the weakest link is. And it's kind of like thinking of it as a vent that needs to be released now and again, and just let off some steam and let off some pressure, I would say, with this Mars. So Taurus, I hope that's been helpful. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. Hello, Gemini. This is a forecast for Gemini rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Gemini, your ruler Mercury is moving through your 5th sign after its exalted position in Virgo until recently. It's now moving through your 5th, and it's moving through combustion, as it does quite regularly, so nothing new there. It's also moving in with Venus to Scorpio later on in the month, opposing Mars. So this could be a bit more of a challenge in one way, because Mars has visited your sign now since the last few weeks. And really until the middle of November, November 13th, when Mars returns to your 12th sign, you're really having to deal with this Mars energy. And because Mars is stationed and moving retrograde now, appearing to move backwards very slowly, it could be a bit frustrating, and you might have had to meet with some delays, some setbacks. There might be some health issues or something like that. For example, that 6th Lord. There might be some plans that you have, the 11th Lord, that are stalling now and that you're getting a bit frustrated about. And it's important to be mindful of that, be patient with your plans as well as your friendships, any kind of group work, any kind of groups at all. Being really patient, I would say, with this Mars transit, because then as soon as Mars goes into Taurus, your 12th, and your ruler goes into the 6th, they're opposing this 6-12th dynamic gets triggered in a big way. And whereas you might see this in terms of having to kind of just balance out, dealing with problems and just kind of letting it all slide. How do you find a balance between doing what you need to do and making improvements versus just letting it go? And that, maybe this is not the best time to approach this. Mars retrograde in your 12th house is not the best time to probably push things through like you would normally. And thinking about your energy and, thinking about maybe just recuperating some energy, to gathering some energy up again over this winter period with Mars retrograde might be a better use of the time instead of just pushing plans through as per usual. And so if you're not doing that and you just want to just plow ahead as you normally do, you could meet with a lot of frustration here. So we've already had an eclipse. It was in your 5th sign, Libra, and the day of the eclipse itself, or later that day, Mercury moved into your 5th sign. So it's emphasizing 5th sign at this time. And then leading up to the lunar eclipse on the 8th of November, a total lunar eclipse in your 11th sign, it is very much about, especially because of Mars's retrograde, focusing on your ambitions, your long-term plans and goals and aspirations in life. And again, your friendships and connections and associations and all of that, all the people you associate with on a kind of bigger scale in your community. And there's a big shakeup that's happening here now. And maybe it's an internal one initially, but that then leads to a more external, more obvious shakeup in your friend circle, all of that. And also in your earnings, because that's 11th house. So it's ambition and earnings and all of those things. So there's some resolution though, because after the 5th house has been activated in this way, a lot of emphasis on the 5th house, which is all about creativity, creative self-expression, your children, the future projects or future orientated thinking that you have, future planning, all of that is a lot of focus there right now. And some of the focus is that you need to clear a way towards that goal. And this resolution that occurs by the 8th of November, and I'll show you that here. So this is the 8th. Full moon opposite the sun, of course, in your 11th. And this is the time to find some resolution around these things and thinking about your long-term goals. And because Saturn has, in a square to this, now stationed direct, whatever frustration you felt or conflict even that you might have felt around your long-term goals versus the bigger changes that are happening, the unexpected changes that are happening around you that you have seemingly no control over, there is a kind of resolution occurring here as well. And it might be a resolution of like, maybe just I need to learn to let these things go. This hasn't worked out in the way I wanted. And now I can just move forward with these new long-term plans now. And thinking about it that way, because this has been the case for the last 2 years, this square between Saturn and Uranus, between your 8th and 11th houses. So again, it's always bringing in the unexpected. And now that all the unexpected has happened with Saturn and Pluto in your 8th, and they're moving forward now, and Saturn moves on in the new year, you can start to, I guess, make bigger plans, long-term plans more easy. There might be more of a sense of an ease in how you approach making your long-term plans with Saturn moving into Aquarius. And so right now, it might feel a little bit like there's setbacks to deal with, Gemini. It's important to be mindful and not frustrated with these setbacks. There are other positive things happening, as I show you, from mid-month. The first week of the month is quite complex, but it does get a lot easier and things get ironed out an awful lot. And so let me show you that. So the first thing to happen is that Venus moves into Scorpio, and then a couple of days later, Mars moves into Taurus. So this is a more positive situation in one way, and again, could be quite complex in another way. Venus in Scorpio is exchanging with Mars in Taurus. And so this is an exchange between your 6th and 12th house. And on paper, that might seem like, oh, I'm going to have to really, surrender some things that I just cannot manage. But in another way, you come out on top, because anytime you have this exchange between what are called two challenging houses, you might say 12th and 6th, dealing with your problems and letting go, ultimately you can negotiate this, compromise, and figure it out. So ultimately, this is a positive thing. It's like 2 minuses make a plus. So yes, Mars is still retrograde and all of that in your 12th house, and it's important not to be too focused on that those things that are a bit annoying you, like, and not saying what's annoying you as well. That might be another issue here, or not even seeing what's annoying you. You just have maybe this general sense of like something's off with Mars in the 12th. It's important not to shoot yourself in the foot over this over the next couple of months, because Mars will retrograde in your 12th house from mid-November until mid-January. So for those 2 months, it's important with Mars not to to sense that frustration build and to find a healthy outlet for it, as opposed to just getting frustrated and bogged down in that feeling, which then could create some other issues, either in your relationships with other people, your co-workers, other people in general, or just a general sense of angst in yourself because you can't let this energy out. It's not, there doesn't seem to be a clear expression for this Mars energy when it's retrograde, especially in your 12th house. So while Venus is in Scorpio, at least there's some negotiation that's possible in November. Now, let me bring it to the next lunation, which is a new moon in Scorpio. So we have a new moon on the 23rd. Now, we've already had the sun in Libra to the middle of November. It then moves into Scorpio into a stronger position, a very internal strength, not a very obvious external strength. But we've already had that sun weakness and the eclipse of the sun in its weakest sign. So it's a dark time. This now is the dark moon, and the dark moon, the new moon, at a dark time also for the moon, because the moon is debilitated in Scorpio. It's its weakest sign. So this new moon on the 23rd of November, there's definitely a sense of darkness around this, but in that darkness also is the potential for improving something, overcoming something, whatever challenge presented, the sixth house can show a way forward. And because its Lord Mars is retrograde in the 12th, there is this sense, most likely, Gemini, that you have to let go of something. Something has to be released at this point. Something has to be finished. Something has to be surrendered. Whatever it is, the 12th house is about ending something. So ending some problem in your life, ending some project that you've been working on, maybe setting an intention for something new that can come in. All of that could be the case for you, Gemini. This new moon in Scorpio is aspected by Jupiter, which itself has now just stationed on the day on the 23rd. And so this is a more positive aspect from the 10th house. So there's definitely some, even though maybe more immediately and more obviously in your environment, there might be some setbacks and this quote unquote dark time. In another way, there's this inner strength, like I said, with Scorpio kicking in and now Jupiter stationing and beginning to move forward in Pisces, your 10th sign, this sense of something moving forward in your plans around work and anything you're doing, actually, your sense of direction moving forward in general. I think there's something more important here, more meaningful and purposeful that you can reconnect with, that you have been reconnecting with. And now you can move forward with these plans, these things that feel more purposeful for you. And again, it could be more work related, but in general, just a sense of where your life is going. And so this new moon on the 23rd is a good time to really set some intentions around these important issues. Again, despite whatever setbacks are going on in the more immediate time frame, there's a deeper, more meaningful pursuit that is calling for attention. And despite the noisiness of the eclipses and the Mars retrograde and everything else that's going on in November, this kind of reset point by the end of November and the new moon is an important time to really connect within, to find that strength to overcome whatever it is you need to overcome, whatever weakness that you have, whatever fear that you have, in order to get what you want, to go forward with your plans and to do something that's more, again, more meaningful, more purposeful. So that's the month of November, Gemini. I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Cancer. This is a forecast for Cancer rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Cancer, we've already had an eclipse. Your ruler of the moon eclipsed the sun in your fourth house on the 25th of October. This is a new beginning, a shaky new beginning perhaps in your fourth house of home and happiness. And a resolution that's reaching a climax really by the 8th of November with a full moon and a totally eclipsed full moon in your 10th sign. And so 10th sign is very much about the actions that are required at this point. And so it might become clear after the 8th of November what needs to happen. And indeed, it might become clear because of things that happen, that seem to happen, perhaps outside of your control. Oftentimes, the eclipses represent these kind of fated experience experiences that, might seem outside of your control, but on another level, they are very much within your control on a deeper level. But often with the nodes, the north and south node represents a much deeper level, a shadow aspect also of yourself, things that you might not even want to admit to yourself, and changes that have to happen now. Again, in your key areas of fourth and 10th house, home and career are two areas, private life, public life, actions that you're taking around the home environment with this reset that's happened now. And because really the first week of November is leading to that total lunar eclipse, it's a bit shaky. Things are uncertain because these changes are happening now, maybe just internally initially, but they ultimately will bring bigger changes in your world, in your life moving forward. Saturn has also stationed in your seventh sign in relationships. So there's definitely a sense of things slowly moving forward here as well, although slowly. But at least they're moving forward. And this is the last time that Saturn will have stopped moving in your seventh sign. So again, um, Saturn has been here for the last 2 years since the beginning of 2020. And so it's put brakes on here in terms of your relationship space. And this is the last time the brake is slowly eased up on and can slowly release over the next couple of months. And by the new year, and move out of your seventh sign and free that area up again so that you can experience more ease in that area. Relationships, obviously, in general, but obviously more especially your, one-to-one relationships, your more intimate relationships or partner. So that's Saturn. And because it's the last time that Saturn has squared Uranus in your 10th sign, how that conflict could be really showing up in this new thing that you want to do at work, or just this new thing you want to do, full stop, and how that has maybe conflicted with your partner and your responsibilities for your partner or with your partner. So that's something that might have been conflicted, if not at least contrasted over the last couple of years. And this is again the last time. And into November, this will start to ease off as well. And the pressure will start to ease. And again, even more in December, and then fully then in January as things lift in a big way. So the other thing to mention, though, is that Mars is retrograde in your 12th sign initially in November, as it has been in October. This is not the easiest place to put Mars, and especially while it's retrograde, it can bring a lot of frustration. It can bring a lot of irritability, and yet you're not clear about where that's coming from because the 12th house is hidden, and it might be projected onto others where they get irritable or angry at you. But it's kind of like, when you're just not feeling right and just tetchy, you will just invite that through experiences with other people. So being mindful of that, because then it moves back into your 11th house, especially be mindful with your friends, any kind of groups at all, actually, any kind of group dynamics. Be just really mindful of this Mars. It will go back into your 11th sign by mid-November. November 13th, at which point actually Venus will be in Scorpio. So that's actually a more positive thing because you have Mars and Venus exchanging the 5th and the 11th signs. So actually, although initially outwardly it might seem that this could be a problem, there's a sort of like a compromise that you can be reached here. So 5th sign more especially is children, if you have any, but it's also about your relationship, lovers. It's also about your future projections and plans, any kind of thing that you're planning for the future, any kind of creative output is the 5th sign. And the 11th is very much about the bigger picture, ambitions, goals that you have in life in terms of the bigger communities, society picture. And also, again, like I said, groups that you associate with or friends. So there's negotiation that has to happen between these two in November, basically. And so you might have to kind of think about how do you negotiate with your, if you have children and friends, for example, or if you have this thing you want to do and then this is a bigger ambition that you want to reach, how do you negotiate with that? So let me bring it forward first to the first major lunation in the month, which is the total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November in your 10th sign. So remember, we had an eclipse already in your 4th sign of home. Lots going on there at the moment in your home life, lots of changes happening. Ketu moving through there with all the planets having crossed over Ketu now by this eclipse in the first week of November. It means that there's a lot of things that you need to get rid of in your home. And this could mean literally the case, a clear out in your home, but also in your heart, like thinking about the 4th house is how you feel. There's, potentially then a lot of things that need to be just let go of here to do a good clear out. And then to lead to this full moon on the 8th of November and this resolution or this culminating point in this full moon, total lunar eclipse in your 10th sign, with Mars, its ruler, again, retrograde and about to move back into your 11th sign. There's a lot to let go of here. There's a lot to relinquish. There's a lot to kind of readjust and reset around as then Mars moves back into your 11th house, and rethinking your whole path in moving forward in a way. And it might be a bit frustrating that there has to be some other way around here, but really, ultimately, it will benefit you because of, like I said, one of these things is the exchange between Venus in Scorpio, which moves in on the 11th, and then Mars, which moves into Taurus on the 13th. So here's where you can then really negotiate the terms and conditions and all of that about whatever it is you want to achieve. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen overnight because Mars is retrograde now for another couple of months in your 11th sign. So your big plans, your ambitions, your goals in life really have to be completely altered at this stage. How you go about getting anything you want really needs to be rethought and approached differently. And thinking about Mars retrograde in the 11th, I mean, it's in one way a good time to kind of really think about your goals in life and your ambitions and your desires. But also, like I said, how you get them, because Mars retrograde isn't, as clear in how you can get them as a direct Mars. Mars retrograde is asking you to go back to find strength in things you used to connect with, people, maybe friendships that used to make you feel strong and connected, make you feel powerful. If there are friends or associations that you have in any way that don't make you feel that, maybe it's time to say, this is not working for me, or negotiate with them, have a discussion with them. Of course, you can see here Mercury is opposite Mars as well. That's another whole dynamic that could be quite complex, where you might have to have those kind of tough conversations with friends or with your children if you have any. But again, whoever it is, whether it's a child, a lover, a friend, or any kind of relationship that you're having right now, there's a lot you can see here, Cancer, that has to be renegotiated and talked out, with Saturn moving direct in your 7th house and all of that. So that's an important time overall from the middle of November. I want to bring it then to the new moon, which happens in your 5th sign, in the sign Scorpio, on the 23rd of November. So basically, we've already had the sun in debilitation in Libra, and the sun not only weakened in Libra, but eclipsed. And your 4th house, home, happiness, all of those things are going through a process now, and have been, and will certainly go through a process in November. Now we're going into a darker period in a way, with the moon being its darkest. It's the new moon, but also in its weakest sign, Scorpio. So in a way, this is kind of really a dark time of the year, October, November. But in another way, this dark time can lead to more light, can lead to more hope and optimism. There's a couple of reasons for that. Is that the sun and the moon move out of their weakest signs, obviously, after this, but also because Jupiter is stationing direct in a trine to the new moon in Pisces. So Jupiter and Pisces stationing now, moving forward from the 23rd of November on the new moon day, is an important reset point for you, Cancer. It highlights key areas of your chart, namely the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th house. The houses 1, 5, and 9 are very much about your direction in life and your dharma or purpose in life, and finding more purpose and meaning in what you're doing. In anything you're planning is important at this juncture on this new moon on the 23rd. So making sure that you're like setting some intention, I would say, no matter how dark it gets in the world, or apparently how dark it gets, it's important to have that inner strength, that guide as well, to find something that is more meaningful to you moving forward, and to make those plans and to reset your intentions around all of these things. Yes, you've got a Mars retrograde to deal with opposite, and you're having to negotiate all of that and think about, getting what you want, whatever plans that you have, whatever meaningful pursuits you want to go for. It might not be clear on how you're going to get there, on how you can move towards them, with a lot of strength and confidence. But when you can open your mind to a different route, this Mars retrograde can be really helpful. And especially, like I said, while Mars exchanges with Venus, until Venus itself then moves out. So Venus will move out in December, but we'll talk more about that next month. By the end of November, you can see that Mars and Venus are exactly opposed at 24 degrees between your 5th and 11th houses. And so again, this is like a lot of passion that you can direct here in planning something new and connecting in with that strength again with Mars retrograde in Taurus, and reconnecting maybe to, again, people who make you feel that way. But just again, being mindful of any kind of frustration that can build and that you can, then possibly take it out on other people. Again, either your friends or your children or whoever it might be. And thinking about what is a better way to direct this energy. If it doesn't have a clear outlet here, how can I redirect it to find a way of expressing this energy somewhere else? So that's the month of November, Cancer. I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. Hello, Leo. This is a forecast for Leo rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Leo, your ruler, the sun, is in its sign of debilitation for the first couple of weeks of November, as it has been for the last couple of weeks of October. This mid-October to mid-November period every year is a downturn in many ways for you energetically. Now, if this is your rising sign, Leo, this is more especially felt physically, most likely. If it's your moon sign, maybe just the mood. And although there are some compensating factors, some mitigating factors, including Venus with the sun in Libra, which it rules, it is overall quite a complex period because we're not just seeing a sun debilitated, your ruler in its weakest sign, in its fall. We're also having just seen your sun being eclipsed. And so this is a time, to be mindful of your energy, mindful of the complexity of this period. The sun in debilitation in your third sign is a complex dynamic in terms of interacting with other people, for sure, at this time. And if you're not assured or feeling self-assured, which is often the case with sun in Libra, then communications can be a bit more of a challenge, where you might have expressed more confidence initially or previously. The sun in Libra in the third might challenge you in this case. So that's just something to be mindful of the first couple of weeks, which especially the first week of November is quite a complex time because we have Ketu, the south node of the moon, the eclipse point, which removes things, which represents losses, is meeting with the sun, as well as Venus and Mercury in your third sign, Libra. So it could, feel like your confidence is a bit knocked, in other words, at this time when there are things that are uncertain, when there might be some losses, when there might be some sense of uncertainty at very least. And eclipses at the very least represent this sense of uncertainty, of things being outside of your control, perhaps, or more fated in some way, or seemingly. This then culminates in a total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November. So it's that first week of November that's particularly complex, as I said. But by the 8th of November, it's kind of reaching this climax really with a total lunar eclipse in Aries. So I'll just show you that now. So here we have on the 8th, a total lunar eclipse in Aries in your 9th sign after an eclipse in your third sign. And of course, these two signs are houses. The third and ninth are where you're experiencing the most change in many ways in this year and next year, with the eclipses continuing through these houses. So the third is very much about, like I said, confidence and communication, communicating that confidence. The ninth sign, though, is the higher mind. It's reaching for something higher beyond your own capabilities, really, and your own self-will. And the ninth could therefore be related to some guidance in some way where you feel protected by someone or something that is more a guiding principle, either your belief systems or your faith. And of course, that could be also tested because Rahu, the North Node, although exaggerates an area of the chart, can also distort it. So, not being very clear about what you believe, for example, and then how do you communicate something if you're not clear about something? These kinds of issues might be some of the complexities that these eclipses are bringing up now. But by the 8th of November, it's definitely reaching ahead. in the sign Aries, where you might have this change of heart, a change of mind around some issue. You might see something might be revealed to you also in relation to what your beliefs are, deeply held beliefs that perhaps, might not be even helpful at this point. And so they're shown for what they are. The other dynamic, of course, involved here is that the ruler of the eclipse in Aries, Mars, is now retrograde, stationed from the end of October, 30th of October, and will backtrack into your 10th sign by the 13th of November. So I'll show you that now as well. This is, again, quite a complex period, but there are some mitigating factors that help things out. So first of all, Venus moves into your fourth sign on the 11th, and then by the 13th, Mars moves back into your 10th. And so this juxtaposed position and this swapping of these two signs with Mars and Venus's sign and Venus and Mars's sign means that there's having to negotiate between home life and work life, 4th and 10th houses, your most public life and your most private life. So maybe there's a more balance that's achievable here. This is potentially a very positive thing ultimately, where you can get a balance between home life and work life, where your life at home may change because of some work scenario, or your work life might change because of some home scenario, something like that, with this exchange. Mercury is also joining Venus in the fourth house. So a few days after that, we then have your ruler, the sun, move out of its debilitation on the 16th of November. So this is your ruler moving out of its weakest sign. This is a more positive thing for you. Ultimately, it's moving into an alignment with Mars opposite, which rules Scorpio. This is, again, I think, a very powerful indication here of connecting to something within yourself, some power, reconnecting to power, especially, Leo. Anything that you used to do, 10th house with Mars retrograde, anything that you used to do that gave you a sense of power is now a good time to reconnect to that power. And again, it could be reconnecting from this perspective of something in the past, but also within yourself. The other things that are happening is that Saturn is now moving forward along with Pluto in your sixth sign, and it's going to move out of your sixth sign eventually into the new year. So this is also a more positive indication of things moving forward in your day-to-day life as well, and your work routines, and especially in terms of any health issues that you might have been dealing with recently. So things can now slowly move forward at least. The next big thing to happen then is the new moon on the 23rd. And there's a couple of things about this new moon, apart from it itself being a new moon, in debilitation. So now we had the sun debilitated for the first couple of weeks. So that weakness of the sun and your vitality maybe less than in some way, maybe feeling under par. But now for the new moon at the end of November, we have the moon in its weakest sign in Scorpio, and it's a dark moon. It's a new moon. So conjoin your sun and your 12th lord in the fourth house. There's definitely here by the 23rd of November, a reset that is possible here, but in the dark. And then in the dark means maybe not being very certain about your direction moving forward, maybe some changes that are happening in your home life and work life, its impact on your work life and how it has that, again, juxtaposed position between the fourth and 10th house. There are some changes happening here for you by the end of November, which might feel a bit uncertain. But at the same time, there's another key thing happening, and that is Jupiter on the new moon on the 23rd is stationing direct in Pisces, aspecting this new moon. So connecting to something that has been more meaningful to you over the past few months, or reconnecting to something, some teachings perhaps that you have been taught, some principles that guide you, some sense of something that gives your life a sense of meaning and purpose, whatever that might be, is now impacting this new moon and this reset in this important time of year, this important juncture for you, and in terms of your direction moving forward. And because Jupiter now is moving forward in your 8th sign, and it rules your 5th sign, so it's very much about future planning and your creative output. There's definitely some negotiation that has to happen here with the 8th sign, but there's a potential here for healing some past traumas, overcoming some challenges, some obstacles in your life with Jupiter now moving forward, planning the future where you might not have been able to see how to plan ahead up until this point. This new moon on the 23rd of November is a time to set some intentions around what you would like to plan now. And so it's an important month really for you, Leo. There's some key transitions happening, some transits that are affecting your life in a very big way. And remember that first week of the month is quite complex, and all of the planets, including your ruler, the sun conjunct Ketu, is a time where you might feel very uncertain about things. And to allow that to play out in any way it's meant to not overly react to it, not to be impulsive about anything, not to feel like you have to make any decision initially, because the eclipses can feel like that, like there's an urgency to do something. But really, it might be best to kind of just sit back on this on the first week of the month, and then things will sort of pan out as they will and work their way out. And a lot of things being ironed out at this time in November, and some changes ahead, and more positive changes for certain for you, Leo. So, Leo, I hope that's a bit of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Virgo. This is a forecast for Virgo rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So, Virgo, your ruler is Mercury. It's moving through your second sign. It has, up until this point, being exalted and for a long period in your sign. And now it's time to put the attention on your second sign, from thyself, then into your second sign. What sustains you? What sustains you in terms of financially, resource wise, but also what you value in life, family, community, and all of these things. What's important to you? This is very much about the second sign. And because you've just experienced an eclipse here on the 25th of October, it's opened out this opportunity now for things to change. Now, that means, or could mean, changes in your finances, in your family dynamics, in what you value. And that culminates in a full moon and a total lunar eclipse in your eighth sign by November 8th. And up to that point, there's quite a lot of complexities going on because of Ketu, the south node, transiting through your second sign, meeting with all of these planets, including your ruler, Mercury. So it meets with Venus, the sun, and then Mercury in your second sign. So you're having to maybe perhaps let go of something, change something, and think about something differently at very least. And again, in terms of what you value, in terms of your work and your direction in life, there might be some changes happening there. And then again, it culminating in that eclipse on the 8th of November is, like I said, a total lunar eclipse. And it's in the eighth house. Now, the moon in the eighth generally, especially if Virgo is your moon sign, that could be somewhat challenging couple of days, 7th, 8th into the 9th. Being mindful of that, being more meditative if you can, just step back a bit from the intensity, because it is an intense full moon and eclipse. It's a total lunar eclipse, and it's almost exactly conjunct Uranus, the bringer of change, with Rahu, which is very like Uranus also. And so there's change, unexpected change, especially going on. And together with Mars, which rules this upcoming eclipse on November 8th, being retrograde right now in your 10th house, moving back into your 9th house, there's this whole sort of reconfiguring your whole direction in life and what you're doing and what gives your life meaning and purpose. So it's quite a lot really of change happening for you in many ways, but it might not necessarily be an outward obvious change. With eclipses, they're oftentimes very psychological initially at any rate. So this is lots of change happening within you, in other words. It might not be visible to anyone else what's going on. So let's bring it up, first of all, to the full moon and total lunar eclipse here on the 8th. And at this stage, Ketu has transited over all of these planets, including Mercury, your ruler. So it happens just the day or two before, the day before actually the eclipse on the 7th, before the 8th, and that full moon. So again, quite a complex time in many ways for the first week of November in terms of financial situations, family dynamics, any kind of relationship issues in terms of joint finances, especially if you're dealing with anything with your partner. There might be some interesting dynamics going on here, and it's probably best to not like make any major decisions about these for the first week, as and when the eclipses bring the change first, then you can respond to the change. If you're making lots of changes on top of all the changes that are already happening with eclipses, or as these eclipses are suggesting, then you're just making more change than is necessary. So, granted, we all feel the urgency of the eclipse and we feel like we need to shake things up, especially if you're in the cycle of the eclipses, um, as in a dasha in Indian astrology, where we look at planetary cycles activated in your chart. It's going to be more relevant, obviously, in that case. But even so, your ruler Mercury involved in these eclipses in a very big way, conjunct, the solar eclipse initially, and then now opposing this lunar eclipse. There's a lot to work out here, in other words, for the first week. And so allow it to work its way out first before you then respond and react to what the changes have been. That would be my advice around that. As we move it forward, we can see some interesting dynamics develop here when Venus moves into your third sign along with your ruler Mercury. And then a couple of days later, on the 13th of November, Mars moves back into your ninth sign. So Mars is now retrograde, moving backwards from our perspective. So it's moving back from your 10th to your ninth. So it's about reconnecting to what is more meaningful and purposeful in your life. And because Venus, which rules this sign, is in your third, in Mars's sign, they're exchanging signs. So this exchange between third and ninth is very much like an exchange of ideas, maybe thinking about things in different ways. How do you believe your life is going to pan out? And what you believe, will have a big impact on how you communicate that. And maybe if you're, thinking differently about things, you maybe can start altering your beliefs, for example, or if your beliefs start altering or changing around some big issues, then you can start communicating something else. So this is the exchange between the third and the ninth houses. Thinking about the third and ninth as the lower and the higher mind, it could be that you have this busy mind with the third house and this higher perspective with the ninth house. And there's a negotiation that has to happen between the two. So that's from mid-month. And then we have a couple of days later on the 16th, we have the sun move into your third sign also, really lighting that up as well. And so this is where we'll have the new moon by the 23rd. So it's really emphasizing how you're communicating, how you're engaging with other people, how you are going for what you want and getting what you want. That's the third house. It's very much about your energy and effort and confidence in getting what you want. So now that the sun is moving into a stronger position in this sign, in the third house in your chart, Virgo, this is a good time to actually think about the things that you want and how you go about getting them. And then by the new moon itself, which is on the 23rd, as the moon and sun come together on the 23rd, we have a new moon in Scorpio. Now, this new moon in Scorpio is a debilitated moon, whereas previously we had the debilitated sun in your second sign and financial matters and all of that, and expense maybe have been an issue. Now it's more about earnings, thinking about what you want to do with your life, your ambitions and all of that, and how that can impact your expense also. What do you need to sacrifice also to get what you want and to go for what you want? This is when you have a new moon, which is the sun and moon, basically the 12th and 11th Lord combined in your third house in Scorpio. So how do you go about getting what you want and communicating what you want clearly? Now, there's this new moon, which is this moon in its fall, in its debilitation, which itself is a dark time of the year and in the month for sure, because it's a dark moon, literally. We can't see the moon, but also it's a debilitated moon. So you might not be that super confident about going for what you want at this point, but at the same time, it's about asking for it at least, and or even just saying it to yourself what it is you want internally. There is another key thing that's going on here, though, which is more positive, and that is Jupiter has stationed on this new moon on the 23rd and trying to aspecting and influencing this new moon. So this is a more positive indication here with Jupiter now stopping moving backwards from our perspective, and slowly now it's going to start moving forward after this new moon. And so your bigger, plans and your objectives and your relationships and your home life and happiness, all of these things, fourth and seventh Lord in the seventh house moving forward, aspecting this new moon in your third. It's very much about what do you want, and connecting with those people that give you what you want, give you the meaning, in other words, that your life needs, and the hope moving forward. connecting with your partner more, connecting with others more in general, I would say, with Jupiter in the seventh house, as now Jupiter begins to move forward, maybe making these connections a bit more easier to handle, to sustain. So that's the new moon on the 23rd of November, a major reset point, as every new moon is, but especially after the beginning of the month, where a lot of things have been very uncertain in the first week of November, leading up to that total lunar eclipse, and things are unexpectedly, shaken up for you. So Virgo, this might be at the end of November, a good time to kind of just settle down with that change and to make your own internal adjustments around that and thinking about what's important to you moving forward. So Virgo, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Libra. This is a forecast for Libra rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Libra, your ruler Venus is moving through your sign. And although that's ordinarily a very positive and very self-assured and energetic time, Venus itself is actually in combustion, disappeared behind the sun, which is also moving through your sign. So there's a bit of a mixed bag here, Libra. Um, if this is your rising sign, this is more especially an energetic thing. If it's your moon sign, obviously emotionally what's going on for you. But there's quite a few complexities going on, and they include the eclipse as well as Venus hidden behind the sun. And the eclipse point, the south node of the moon, meets with your ruler Venus by exact degree on the 3rd of November. So this is where you might feel a bit sort of uncertain about things. There are a lot of complexities going on here as then South Node Ketu meets with the Sun and then Mercury, impacting so many different areas of your life and impacting you very personally in terms of perhaps just not being certain about things, or perhaps even having a lot of changes happen since this eclipse on the 25th of October. And things seem very uncertain now as we reach this culmination point on the 8th of November with a total lunar eclipse in your seventh sign. So there's a lot that you have to be open to, and change that is uncertain, and that might just make you feel a bit, less than in some way. Your energy might not be up to par because, of course, when changes happen, we have to process change and need a lot more energy in processing change. So I guess the advice which is given usually during the eclipses is not to make any major changes, because I believe the reason for that is, there's already a lot of changes going on. So why actually make more changes than is necessary? Why not just allow it to play out in the way it's going to play out, allow the changes to occur, and then to respond to those changes and make any subsequent adjustments you need to, instead of piling on more change upon change. And so Ketu is this kind of very exacting force in the horoscope where it really kind of clears things, and it can bring clarity on the one hand, but it can just as easily bring confusion where, you're not clear about things anymore because this thing is no longer there or whatever it might be. There are some key changes going on here in the way you think about things, the way you plan things, the way others do that as well, and its impact on you always is the case for you, Libra, and how other people impact you. And because then, if we get to the full moon and total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November, it is in your seventh sign. And there's a whole process as you're going through all these very personal changes, and perhaps again the sense of uncertainty in yourself. There's a lot of changes that are happening in how you relate to others and with other people in general in your life, including your relationships. So this total lunar eclipse on the 8th shows unexpected change, perhaps, or perhaps if you're open to it, that you really sat with this for some time, you realize the inevitable, that changes are happening here. And to think about these changes as positive, that they have to happen in this way, but again, without enforcing them, without pushing anything through prematurely. The other dynamic here is that Mars, which rules the full moon on the 8th of November, has now already started to move backwards itself, behaving like the nodes. behaving it in perhaps more extreme ways. So your partner, your relationships, your home life, your family life, your finances, all of these things impacting what you believe is possible moving forward, and perhaps that you cannot move forward in some regard because Mars is now moving backwards. And Mars will move back into your eighth sign, into Taurus, a couple of days after your ruler Venus and Mercury both move into Scorpio, your second sign. So it's really highlighting this dynamic now between your second and eighth, and financial matters, again, going back to the drawing board in many ways, perhaps, and having to renegotiate something here because Mars and Venus are swapping signs, Scorpio and Taurus. So maybe having to negotiate with other people, whether it's a business partner, your romantic partner, any kind of partner, any kind of consultancy work or anything like that, you're thinking about maybe having to negotiate more at this time. Mars retrograding the eighth could certainly bring up some issues here in terms of joint resources and some setbacks in terms of jointly held finances. And again, although there's negotiation that is possible, it could be quite a complex time. So again, I would say just to kind of let it pan out the way it is going to for the first week, especially into the middle of the month, and then to react to and respond to appropriately the changes that have already occurred, I would say. Let's move it forward then to the new moon. So after that intense full moon on the 8th, where, it could have shaken things up quite a bit, we have the sun move into Scorpio by mid-month on the 16th of November. And then we have the moon join it on the 23rd. Now, this is a new moon in Scorpio with the sun and moon come together. And unlike the sun, which was in the debilitation in Libra, although quite possibly a very positive thing for you ultimately, with your 11th Lord, the sun highlighting your sign, lighting you up, recharging you, rejuvenating you, despite the combustion of Venus in many ways. And perhaps because of the combustion of Venus, having that kind of need to kind of take some time out because you feel burnt out and spent. And then just having to use that time to recuperate. Now, by the end of November, we have the sun in its debilitation at its weakest, and for the new moon, which is the dark moon. So it's quite a dark time on the 23rd, around that period leading up to that. But it's an important one. It's an important reset in the dark. It's like it's always darkest before the dawn. And this is probably the darkest in many ways. And yet there is the dawn, and that is indicated by Jupiter, which is now stationed direct on the 23rd and going to slowly start moving forward now and aspects this new moon. So it has a big say in this new month coming up ahead in terms of making plans, in terms of moving forward with more hope on the horizon. Again, despite this more dark period by the end of November. And you might not experience the darkness in ways others might. Darkness might for you be a very peaceful time where you just have some alone time, where you just reconsider things, go within yourself and think about what's important to you. This is very much about what the second house is all about, thinking about what sustains you as a person, thinking about the people, whether the family or the community that sustains you, thinking about the things that you hold dear. And because Venus, your ruler, is with Mercury combined with this new moon, and they're at the same degree, basically, they might be fighting it out a bit. There might be some jostling around, what's more important. But through the process, you figure out what's more important. And on this new moon on the 23rd, it's a time to set some intentions around what is important to you and to allow that Jupiter, that hope, that optimism, however faint it might be at this stage, to guide you forward, that inner voice, that still voice in, being more clear about what that is. So, Libra, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Scorpio. This is a forecast for Scorpio rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Scorpio, this is quite a complex time for you because your ruler Mars is now retrograde, and it has stationed retrograde on October 30th and will slowly move back from your 8th sign to your 7th sign by November 13th. So there's something to negotiate here. There's some compromise that has to occur, and it's possibly not the easiest thing to compromise because Mars, isn't very compromising. Mars is a part of us that wants to kind of be gung-ho about something and move forward. And when it moves back, and especially as it moves back into Taurus, which is all about compromise, you might have to juggle some things. Now, there is a more positive indication here by mid-November, as Venus also moves into your sign, exchanging with Mars in your seventh sign. So there is basically the potential for more compromise and negotiation, but it is still quite a complex time, especially starting out the month from the end of October with the eclipse having occurred in Libra in your 12th sign, and now Mars retrograde in your 8th sign with an upcoming total lunar eclipse in your 6th sign. These 6th, 8th, 12th houses are very activated right now. And because these areas are challenging, though, this could be very rewarding also. And Scorpio, you are the natural eighth house of the zodiac anyway. You like a good challenge. It's still challenging, and you have to be mindful of that so that you're not, overspending your energy on other frivolous things that are unnecessarily, and you're not really allowing your energy to recuperate at this time with the sun in your 12th, the eclipse sun in your 12th. Um, and your Mars, your ruler, in your eighth retrograde. This is about really recuperating energy, recharging yourself, going back to something that perhaps gave you a feeling of strength and courage with Mars, and just slowing down and maybe sleeping more also, even with the sun in the 12th. And then culminating in this full moon, this eclipse period culminates in a full moon and a total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November. So if I just show you that here, this is the full moon in Aries, opposite, of course, the sun in your 12th, with Venus and Mercury both involved here. And up until this point, really, because Ketu transits and eclipses in a way, the sun itself, of course, Venus and Mercury, there are some things that are very uncertain that are happening. And because of all of this is happening in your 12th house, which itself is uncertain, there are things you cannot see right now, some dynamics you're not aware of fully, that it's best probably just to leave things as they are, and to react as you need to, of course, to respond appropriately, but to not necessarily make any major changes at this time, because you're not perhaps clear about everything at this stage. But this full moon then on the 8th, after a very uncertain first week of the month, this full moon reaches this kind of crescendo, and it is on the 8th of November in your 6th house, conjunct Uranus, the agent of change, with also Rahu here, totally eclipsing the moon, which itself is an agent of change and transformation. There's a lot of change going on in your day-to-day life and your work routines and your health. And so there's an important time here to kind of consider these changes. And especially because Mars, which rules this, is retrograde on top of that, on top of the eclipse. This is a time to, again, not force things through necessarily, but just respond appropriately as things start to change, and not pile on more change than is necessary. An eclipse in your 6th house after an eclipse in your 12th house is about finding a balance between your everyday work routines and health regimes, and obsessing perhaps with Rahu over problems, and allowing things to just kind of, just settle and rest and restore with the 12th house. And of course, you might be tipped, more so on the side of problems with Rahu in the 6th. And especially around this full moon and eclipse on the 8th of November. So it's important that you don't lose perspective. Losing that perspective is not going to help you solve a problem at any rate. And finding the balance in the opposite, and just learning to surrender certain things, and that, just let it go at this point, without becoming too extreme on that end of the spectrum either, where it's like you don't deal with any problems and you just let everything slide. That's obviously not the ideal either. There isn't always a sort of balance between all the signs, and especially where the eclipses are. And they can become very imbalanced for a time, and it feels like everything's really urgent and, intense. But they will work themselves out in their own good time. Patience is required here for sure. And if I show you here what's happening in the days that follow, we have Venus move into your first sign on the 11th. And then a couple of days later, we have Mars move into your 7th sign. So this is an interesting dynamic here, because Mars and Venus are exchanging signs. So you have Venus in your sign, in Mars' sign, Scorpio, and you have Mars in Venus' sign, Taurus. So they're swapping signs. And this is quite a positive indication here that would otherwise probably been a bit problematic, and may still be, over the winter because of Mars continuing to retrograde through your 7th house. But while the Venus is in your 1st house, there's definitely a more of a potential here of compromise and negotiation. 1st and 7th lords swapping signs like this shows this, being able to put yourself in your partner's shoes, for example, is one good kind of obvious indication here. Or your partner themselves being able to, see it from your point of view. So it's definitely a lot more helpful, I would say, despite the complexities that are obviously here with Mars retrograde now in your 7th house. Mars in Taurus in general is kind of not its favorite sign to be in because it kind of gets bogged down in, relationship matters. But retrograde in your 7th house, then it's like having to go back over issues and work things out. It's important that you reconnect with your own inner strength, Scorpio, at this time. Whether this is your rising sign, Scorpio, or moon sign, this is about connecting with something that makes you feel strong and courageous and being able to deal with these issues with any other, with whether it's your partner or any other, with the world out there. There are things to overcome at this time. There are issues to overcome, and you will be able to do that. Now, a couple of days later, we have the sun move into your sign. Now, this is, a time every year, whether it's your rising sign or moon sign, to recharge from the middle of November to the middle of December in that what seems like the really dark time for most of us. In that darkness is the time to reset that inner dial, if you will. For you, Scorpio, the sun moving through your sign is a time to rejuvenate despite the outward darkness. And so perhaps because of the outer darkness, actually, that you can actually just go within and find that strength within and recharge your batteries. This is the sun in your sign, along with Venus and Mercury. All this while, of course, Mars is opposite and retrograde in your 7th sign. So it's that itself is about recharging. If you think about like any planet retrograde, it's like a prefix re. So recharge, recuperate, reassess. All of that is important in terms of your energy and all of that. So that's the 17th. And then a few days later, the moon joins it on the 23rd. And this is really an important time for you, Scorpio, because it's a new moon in your sign. And we have Jupiter stationed direct in your 5th sign, aspecting this new moon. So basically, this is an important new moon on the 23rd of November. And a reset point in that dark time, again, an internal reset, especially because it's a new moon. The moon is not visible, it's dark and it's debilitated. So this kind of culmination point in a way, or this reset at this time in Scorpio is a very personal reset for you on the 23rd of November. And kind of really setting some intentions, I would say, Scorpio, around this time will be so important. I mean, I think you will be anyway, regardless. But because now also Jupiter is stationing direct in your 5th sign, aspecting the new moon, it will be an important time to not only reset some personal intentions, but to plan something for your future and to look to the future for a new hopeful horizon. With Jupiter now slowly about to move forward by the end of November in your 5th sign. And so you can therefore slowly move forward with plans. So this is definitely a more positive indication despite the outer darkness, despite the darkness, I mean, in the world around us. And the Scorpio theme is very prominent. For you personally, Scorpio, this is a very intentional and purposeful and very powerful time. But again, only if you tune in and don't look without to find that strength, to find something to give you, to prop you up in some way, in kind of some more immediate sort of temporary way. This is a more permanent change that's happening within you, Scorpio, that I think will be an important time for you, not just this year, but in many ways, in terms of all of these years, in terms of moving forward, with Jupiter now moving forward in your 5th sign. So use this time intentionally and plan ahead, I would say. And at the same time, like I said, with Mars retrograde, it's not like you can just gung ho move ahead and just charge through things. You have to consider other people, especially during this period while you're planning the next step. And as long as you can do that, then you can get other people on board and negotiate and compromise, which is also reflected in these planetary alignments. So, Scorpio, I hope that has been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Sagittarius. This is a forecast for Sagittarius rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Sagittarius, your ruler Jupiter is spending its last month in retrograde motion in your fourth house of the home and happiness and private life. So it will station direct by the end of the month on the 23rd on the new moon, which is a new moon in your 12th house. So this is definitely a turning point month for you, where something perhaps needs to be relinquished, let go of, in order for you to start again and to move forward. And indeed, you can move forward more after November as your ruler starts to move forward in Pisces. So we have a lots more going on, of course, in the month. I'll get to the Jupiter station when we get to the new moon, but before then, we have a full moon and a total lunar eclipse to negotiate. So you're experiencing this in your fifth house. You've already had the solar eclipse in your 11th house, Libra, with all of these planets now gathering in Libra, including the Sun, as well as Mercury and Venus. And as all of these planets transit across the eclipse degree, the Ketu, the south node of the moon, there's a lot of uncertainty in the first week of November leading up to this eclipse as a result. A lot of potential losses also, but it may just be a sense of things not having worked out the way you want them to, perhaps. This is the area of ambition, of course. It includes your seventh and 10th Lord Mercury, which is all about relationships and career, and generally your direction in life, of course, because all of the key cornerstones of your chart are being impacted in this way, as well as Venus, which is your sixth and 11th, which is very much about your ambitions itself and how do you work towards your goals. So again, with this sense of Ketu and then with the new moon in Scorpio, there's this sense of needing to let go of some of these goals. Because when you have the 11th house impacted in such a way, and then the 11th Lord and all the other planets from the 11th house moving into the 12th house of surrendering, it's important to consider that as an important time to let go of whatever it is so you can move on, basically. So the first week, like I said, it's quite uncertain. We're starting out the month. You can see here the moon has joined Saturn and Pluto in your second sign. Thankfully, Saturn has started to move forward now, although slowly, and it's going to break up this square with Uranus in your fifth. And in a way, you might say that this total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November in your fifth with Uranus, exactly conjunct Uranus, in fact, is the last sort of push through this sort of quite a challenging dynamic, I think, has been the case in the last 2 years. And that has been for you between the second and fifth house, which is very much about finances and your whatever you want to do in life, your future plans. That's fifth house. If you have children, of course, it's going to impact children and finances. Of course, obviously, they both would experience that kind of conflict or at least contrast. So it's like you want to make these plans, but financially you cannot. Fifth house and second house. You want to do this for your child, but then there's this financial, restriction, second house. So that's the contrast, or again, possible conflict you've been experiencing, but this is the last time. And this total lunar eclipse on the 8th, after Saturn starts to move forward and break up this square with Uranus, is the last week really where you might feel this intensity. So let's go to the full moon on the 8th. First of all, here it's conjunct Uranus. And so there might be some, resolution here as well, but maybe a surprising development. You might surprise yourself. Your child might surprise you if you have children. You might surprise your own self in terms of, what you're capable of planning now. You might think, oh, I've been thinking about these things, and, then it's kind of like impulsively going ahead and doing it or something. Again, remember that Saturn is just slowly moving forward. You can see here it still hasn't moved past the 24-degree mark, but Uranus has moved to 22, so they're just getting further apart now, but they're still quite closely in this square. So until Saturn gets out of Capricorn in January, you might have to, contend with this sort of conflict. And so, obviously just be mindful of your financial situation or your family dynamics or resources that you have to do anything you want to do. So that's the full moon. It's quite an intense one. It's really contrasting as well, obviously, the moon and the sun opposite in your 11th, and looking at what it is you would love to do. That's the fifth house, versus, you know, the 11th house, which is very much about making money and earning and all of that, but also about friendships and associations and groups that you hang out with or associate with in any way. Whereas the fifth house and this full moon is very much about finding a balance between those things and the thing that you would love to do. You know, the fifth house is very much what's dear to you, what's closest to you. And of course, children are one of those things. But if you don't have children, it's anything that you feel is like yours, this is mine, and this is uniquely mine. And I want to express this in my own unique way. And the fifth house is that anyway. But when you put an eclipse and Rahu and Moon and Uranus, the bringer of change, then it's very much about, I want to do it my way kind of thing. So that's the full moon on the 8th of November. Let me bring it forward. I'm going to highlight here the Mars retrograde in your seventh sign, which began on October 30th. So this adds complexity into the full moon and eclipse, and further complexity as the moon joins it then on the 12th and 11th, 12th into the 13th. So basically, we have this Mars retrograde starting in your seventh, but moving back into your sixth. Mars is most definitely better placed in the sixth than in the seventh. Mars in the seventh could create problems in your relationships, because it's retrograde, especially. But then it moves back by mid-month. So you'll see an interesting dynamic form here where Venus and Mercury have moved into your 12th in Scorpio, and Mars has returned to your 6th in Taurus. So Mars and Venus are swapping signs. Mars is in Venus' sign, Venus in Mars' sign. So this is an exchange between the 6th and 12th houses, which is like a double negative, and it can create a very positive situation. So it's like, sixth house, for example, is overcoming some challenge, some problem, dealing with a debt. You want to clear a debt, dealing with someone you perceive as an enemy or a threat or a competition in some way. Sixth house, dealing with some bad habit or whatever it might be. Sixth house. 12th house is about letting all that go, surrendering, just forgiving as well, not having any grudges, all of that. So these exchanging means that you can ultimately overcome a problem here in November. So that's a positive thing that would otherwise seem quite negative, because it's actually maybe presenting you with a problem. But actually, ultimately, this is positive so that you can actually overcome it. So when you add that to the mix of what's going on when your second and fifth house, where there's this financial concern around things, where you want to plan something, combined with this exchange between the 6th and 12th, there is a potential here for, in November, to overcome some issue and then be able to move on and make some plans for the long term. So that is Mars moving back, returning to Taurus, really for the whole winter, actually. It's going to retrograde until the middle of January in your 6th house, and then move forward, but won't move out until March. So you're really in this for the long haul in a way as well. You're looking at 6th house Mars as a really good time to overcome your own inner demons, whatever about the outer circumstances. And that's a positive thing, ultimately. Mars in your 6th also aspects your sign, as well as your 12th sign. And so this can, in one way, challenge as well for you to kind of step up and do it. That's the point of Mars in the 6th. But it's making sure that you, again, get a balance between the 6th and the 12th, always with, not overly focusing on the problems either, and being able to rest fully at night, to wind down in the evening and being able to switch off so that you're recharged and can tackle the issues again next day. So I'll move it forward to the next lunation. The major lunation is the new moon in your 12th. So the sun moves into your 12th on the 16th of November, and then the moon joins it on the 23rd for a new moon, 7 degrees of Scorpio. So this is kind of like an ending point on the 23rd, but a new beginning in many ways, because on this new moon, Jupiter, your ruler, is stationing direct, aspecting this new moon in your 12th from 4th to 12th. So this is very much about, there's something, again, maybe you need to let go of to start again in some way, either in your home environment, in some way, in any kind of direction in your life, really. It's like this sense of direction. The four cornerstones, especially the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th, are very much about your direction in life and where you're going and where you sense you're going. And of course, your ruler going forward now, at least starting to go forward, can give you by the end of November and on this new moon a sense of things moving forward. So this is a good time to reset some intentions, but to, again, because it's a new moon in your 12th house, is as important to end something when you start something new. To set some intentions means also maybe letting go of certain things. And Mercury and Venus are at the same degree at this juncture as well. So you might have to kind of negotiate some of the details here. And the details might not be clear also. So that's something to be mindful of. And again, not overly focusing on problems, but tackling your problems as much as you can, and then letting go, surrendering. And letting it go to the, the bigger picture. This is very much about what Saturn and Jupiter are all about. And again, I'll remind you that Saturn will start to move forward now quicker. It's at 25 degrees by the end of November into December, and then move out by January and take its gaze off Jupiter, your ruler in Pisces, where Pisces and Jupiter can then be more free to expand. So now, in a global context, that's not a great thing in terms of inflation, but for you personally, Sagittarius, this would be a great time in terms of your happiness and your home life. And it's from January to April, especially with Jupiter here. So that's a kind of like eye into the new year more so, but this is a turning point because of Jupiter stationing direct at this point on the new moon. So Sagittarius, I hope you found that useful. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. Hello, Capricorn. This is a forecast for Capricorn rising and or moon sign for November 2022. Capricorn, your ruler Saturn has stationed direct from October and into November. Now we're going to see it move forward. Maybe just 1 degree. It's slow, but it's at least moving forward. Saturn is always slow, of course, but it in October didn't move anywhere. So it just felt like you were going nowhere in one way. So now that it's moving forward in November, it's also going to start breaking up this square between it and Uranus in Aries, which is, possibly a conflicted, at least contrasted situation between yourself and your home life and the changes that are happening in your home environment and your own personal changes that you're going through. So Saturn now having stationed in October, in November, things will start to move forward, and by December move forward even more so, until actually it will move out quite quickly then by January. So by mid-January, then Saturn will move out of your sign into your second sign and, release you from any kind of bond or any kind of restriction that you might have been feeling. And also, it might have been in the last couple of years a positive thing for you. You might have felt very grounded. It might not have felt like a restriction, but in the world, quite obviously, the world has felt restricted in lockdowns and all of that. You personally might have, reveled in that. You might have enjoyed that. It might have been good for you. And so looking at it that way, you can think about it differently. But in another way, it's at the same time, it's still restricting. And the contrast between that and your home life, the changes in your home and place of living even, might have been a bit of a challenge. So that at least is breaking up, and it will break up more and more in November and December and on. And so this is a key turning point with Saturn and moving away now from Pluto. Finally, it's been with Pluto since, well, actually it's been with Pluto since 2017, but more so since 2020 by exact degree. But really since 2017, we've been dealing with this Saturn-Pluto theme. And finally next year in January, Saturn and Pluto break up, and this kind of dire, prediction, doom and gloom sort of forecast because of these two together can start to ease. Now, it doesn't mean they're like completely breaking up, as in Saturn is still within its own sign, Aquarius. Pluto still remains in a Saturn sign, Capricorn, but they are no longer in the same sign. So it doesn't feel as intensely so dire, I would say, from January. Now, what does this mean for you personally? It means that, whatever changes you personally been going through in private, you've started the process. So it doesn't feel perhaps by next year as serious, as intense. Let me put it that way. And because Saturn, as it moves now and into Aquarius, where it's actually stronger than in Capricorn, it's a big shift. So I'll talk more about that anyway when we come to that in January, but just want to highlight this shift that's happening now in October, and into November it will start to become more apparent. So there are other things going on. Of course, we have the eclipses. We're now in what's called the eclipse window. We have already had a solar eclipse in your 10th sign, in the house of action, in work, in your career space. And all of these planets having gathered here with Venus and Mercury, and now all of them crossing the south node. So there could be some potential losses here, or a need to kind of let go of some way you think it should be or something, because Ketu first meets with Venus, then Sun, Mercury in the first week of November. The first is Venus, the ruler of your 10th, your career space, on the 3rd of November. So I'll just show you that here. So here's the 3rd of November, and Venus and Ketu join. So this could be just letting go of some plan that you had as well, because Venus is your 5th lord around work, or any plans you have around anything, really. Anything you would love to do. And maybe you have to kind of alter your plans around that. And then subsequently, like I said, it will then be with Mercury and, well, first of all, it's pretty much Mercury and the Sun together on around that 6th, 7th period. And then on the 8th, we have the eclipse. So it's definitely quite an intense first week in November, where Ketu is this sense of having to kind of let go of some way you thought it should be, or even let go of something. There might be some losses here in some way. And so to let those go would be obviously more helpful leading up to this total lunar eclipse, where unexpected changes are possible here in your 4th house in your home. So a full moon eclipsed by Rahu and exactly conjunct Uranus, the agent of change, shows the potential for unexpected change here, of course. So that's one thing to note, is that it's, in one way, it's like an inevitable result of what's happened already with this eclipse in your 10th house. So if changes are happening in your work, in how whatever you do, actually, whatever you're planning, that's likely then going to lead to changes for this full moon in your home. Or just in your private life, just even if it's not in your home house situation, it could be just a shift of perception around what makes you happy. I've been doing it this way, and now I think I've changed this, and I have to change this, or this no longer works. And now, okay, maybe this is the best way to do it. And then the result of that being, okay, well, actually, I feel differently about this now. So this is the whole kind of thing with the eclipses in your 4th and 10th house. It's the kind of more extreme end of the spectrum, with the 4th and 10th being the more extreme private life, the more inner life 4th house, and the more extreme outer life 10th house. So with the nodes here, always, it creates even more of an extreme. And it could also obviously create more of an extreme imbalance to be mindful of, so that you're not like, neglecting one for the other. For example, that you get the balance right, like the work-life balance right, as they say. So the other main thing to happen is the Mars retrograde, which has stationed on the 30th of October, and then will move backwards from your 6th house into your 5th house by the 13th of November. It does an interesting thing as it does so. It'll exchange with Venus in Scorpio, your 11th. So first of all, let's talk about Mars in your 6th retrograde. It probably is one of the better places to put Mars in one way. It's like tackling problems, overcoming issues, dealing with any competition or any problem that you have in your life. When retrograde, it's about, going back to the drawing board in many ways. Not pushing forward and trying to overcome an issue like with brute force, but kind of negotiating with whoever or whatever in a way that's more helpful, and maybe talking it out a bit more, because it's the sign Gemini. But what happens here is interesting, because Venus moves in on the 11th, and then a couple of days later on the 13th, we have Mercury moved into Scorpio also, but Mars moved into Taurus. This means Mars is in Venus's sign and Venus is in Mars's sign, exchanging between the 5th and 11th signs. And what otherwise might have been a bit of a challenge in November actually becomes a very positive exchange. between 5th and 11th. So, but there is an exchange. So you have to negotiate between what you would love to do and your earning capabilities, for example, or with your children and your friends. You might have to juggle a bit there, or you have some future plans you'd like to make, and then you're trying to think about what you would love to do and what you also need to do, or what other people would love of you. All of these kinds of negotiations are likely to have to take place in November because of Mars's retrograde in your 5th, exchanging with Venus in your 11th. And then because the 11th is very focused now, as planets then shift from your 10th house into your 11th, and the new moon on the 11th on the 23rd, and I'll show you that here. This is an important juncture on the 23rd for a couple of reasons. It's a new moon, so all new moons are important. It's a new moon in Scorpio in its sign of fall. So we've already had the Venus, or the Sun in its fall, in its debilitation in Libra, and by the 16th of November, it moves into Scorpio, into a stronger position. Now we have the moon in its weakest position for the dark moon on the 23rd of November. So this is kind of like the darkest before the dawn in a way. And, to know that it's always darkest before the dawn obviously is helpful, but to also know that there's something else coming in here, and that is Jupiter. Jupiter is stationing direct on this new moon on the 23rd and aspecting the new moon from Pisces. And it's in your 3rd sign, aspecting your 11th sign. So this is very much a more hopeful situation in terms of your confidence in going for something you want, and to set some intentions here on the new moon in your 11th around things that you would like to do, ambitions that you have, and it might be just a very private setting of intention. You might not be very public. You could talk about it with your friends, 11th house for sure. That, might be a good way of actually making it more real. Absolutely. But it could be, because it's Scorpio, a very private thing. So whatever it is, it's a setting of intention and planting seeds here at this potentially a very dark time of the year. After coming through the sun's dark period, we're really into this kind of dark phase in a way with Scorpio moon. So, but again, like I said, that hope, that new hope springs forth from this dark time, with Jupiter now stopping moving backwards in Pisces, and will start to move forward. And then by the new year, as Saturn has moved out of your sign into Aquarius, it takes its gaze off Jupiter in Pisces, which is more free to expand on hope and opportunity. In your 3rd house is about grabbing opportunities as they come, whether it's opportunities for travel, or just more engagement with other people, and just enjoying yourself, even simply. Despite what's said about Jupiter in the 3rd being the worst place to put Jupiter, I mean, it can be fun. The reason why it's said to be the worst place for Jupiter is because oftentimes we can have just a lot of fun, and we don't focus on the more meaningful pursuits of life. But another way to look at that is maybe finding meaning in just frivolous fun, So this new moon in Scorpio is a dark time, but it's a key turning point, and a new hope springs forth from this time in your life. So I hope that's been of help, Capricorn. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time. Hello, Aquarius. This is a forecast for Aquarius rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Aquarius, your ruler Saturn has started to move forward at last after being retrograde in your 12th house, and will start to move forward and out of your 12th house by the new year. So October and into November especially, you'll start to feel it move. It feels like a turning point, I'm sure. This kind of ending phase as well. Yes, it's the 12th house, this cleaning of a slate, this ending something, finally finishing whatever it is. Maybe it's a project you're working on, or maybe it's something that just didn't work and you just need to finish it and move on. And you will be moving on, of course, by the new year as Saturn moves into your sign. And this is very much a new beginning for you, Aquarius. At the same time, we have Rahu with Uranus in your 3rd sign, and it's still in a square to Saturn in your 12th sign. So there's a bit of give and take that has to still happen here, but it still is moving on itself, and moving out of this tight square between Saturn and Uranus, at least, which has been potentially conflicted, because this give and take might have been a bit, difficult to negotiate. This new thing that you would like to do with Aries, 3rd house, and at the same time you're trying to finish up this other thing, you know, or you'd like to do this, but then there's all this expense involved, or you're interested in somebody, but then there's just like this sense of I want to be on my own, or interested in doing something, but I just don't want to be um with anyone at the moment. So it's like this contrast between the third and the 12th has been particularly highlighted in the last 2 years, in fact, for you. And this is the turning point, Aquarius. This is where it starts to move or shift at least more than in October, even, and starts to shift more in December, even. And then by January, it's moved out. This is broken up into a more cooperative engagement between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn and Uranus seem completely unengaged anyway, but when you put them in a square, they just don't behave. They don't help each other out at all. But when Saturn goes into Aquarius, your sign, they're more helpful to each other. So that's the major shift in a way. But what's actually happening is that we're leading to, after an eclipse in your ninth sign in Libra on the 25th of October, 2 weeks later, we're having a full moon total eclipse on the 8th of November in your third sign with your ruler Rahu eclipsing the moon and exactly conjunct Uranus in Aries, your third sign. This is like the pivotal point, really. I think this is where it's all come to a head. And for you, Aquarius, it's going to feel like everything is shifting in October or in November. So the first week of November is quite complex leading up to this eclipse. So there's no denying that. There's things that you have to let go of. Maybe it's just outworn beliefs, because what's happening is all the planets having, had the eclipse in Libra, we're still having to experience the planets transit the eclipse point, the southern point, the southern node, Ketu. First, it's Venus on the 3rd. So on the 3rd of November, Venus meets with Ketu. And then a couple of days later, 6th, 7th, we have Venus past the southern node, and Sun and Mercury meet with the south node. So there are a lot of key things going on here, a lot of changes, maybe having to let go of some way you think things should be in your plans overall, in your home life, in your relationships, in all of these things, and especially, again, how that impacts what you believe is possible, because it's all happening in your ninth house. So in terms of if you're a teacher, for example, or somebody who teaches or guides other people, if you're a father or mother, in any way you're guiding other people, this might be a big change for you in terms of how you then communicate that. And even if you're not any of those things, it's about changing your core belief systems and guiding principles. And that subsequently, and on the 7th, if I show you here, or on the 8th, sorry, on the 8th, we have a total lunar eclipse in your third. And this is like about all the changes that are happening in what you think is possible and what you believe to be true, then altering the way you communicate and what you go for. So on the 8th of November, there's some changes going on in you communicating something. And it's going to be something important to you because it's the North Node, your ruler, totally eclipsing the moon, your sixth lord. So it's like overcoming some challenge and just saying what you need to say, or doing what you need to do, going for what you need to go for, what you would love to do based on these new changing beliefs that you have and what you see is now possible. And there's definitely more possible and more potential here and from now on. As this kind of last rung of Saturn finishes out in your 12th house of this ending phase that has kind of in a way held you back in the last couple of years from doing these things that you want to do. Now it's finishing, and there's this building something new now coming in a stronger and stronger way. And I think this eclipse and this month of November is a big turning point in that regard, Aquarius. So it's an important time for sure. So that's the full moon total lunar eclipse in your third sign. It is quite intense, definitely. And leading up to it, it's more intense, and it might feel that way. And it might not be that there's anything happening. It just might all be in your head, of course, because it's an eclipse. It's all psychological initially, but it could show something happening out of the blue. You might say something or do something, and it's like, I didn't know that's what I was going to do, but there you go. Or I didn't know that's what was going to be said, and how that worked out, whatever it might be. there's a need to be open-minded to the changes here, because Uranus is also exactly conjunct this eclipse moon. And Uranus is the agent of change as well as Rahu. So it's all about changing here, what you are saying, communicating in any way, and how you look at what you are going for and how you go about getting it. So that is the eclipse. Let's move forward. There are other things going on, including a Mars retrograde in your 5th house, initially moving back to your 4th, changes over this winter in your home life for sure, but it starts with your 5th. Mars stationed on the 30th of October, and it will continue through your 5th retrograde until the 13th of November. And we'll have an interesting dynamic, which I'll show you now, as Venus moves into Scorpio, and then 2 days later we have Mars move into Taurus. So they're swapping signs. So let me bring it back. So this is your rising sign. So Mars is in your 4th house, Venus in your 10th house, but they're in each other's signs. So they're swapping 4th and 10th. That's actually a positive thing, but it does mean that there's a negotiation that has to happen here. There's some changes happening in your home life from mid-November, and that will change what you're doing. 4th house is home, 10th house is career, but 4th house is also happiness, 10th house actions you take that impact your happiness. In this case, what you're doing is going to impact your happiness in a big way. So there is seemingly something positive that you're going to be doing from the middle of November, but also moving forward as Mars continues to retrograde through your 4th house for all of the winter until mid-January, and will stay in your 4th house until March, actually, but especially till mid-January. So there's this sense of changing it up at home, shaking it up at home, redoing the whole thing, or looking at what makes you happy and looking at what you're doing and how it has an impact on your happiness. And your work, of course, will be a key thing here, and work-life balance will be a major consideration, of course, during this period, and especially in November. Then the sun moves in out of its weakest sign, Libra, into your 10th house of career and lights that up. And the sun is very much at home in the 10th house. So from the 16th of November, this would be a good time to promote yourself and your work. This would be just a more visible time, perhaps. And then we have a new moon. And by the way, the sun is in your 10th house from mid-November to mid-December. So that's a good time professionally, I imagine. But then from the 23rd, we have an interesting thing going on. So the moon joins the sun in Scorpio. It's a debilitated moon. It's a dark moon. It's a new moon, but it's a reset in that darkness. And it's always darkest before the dawn, as it said. And this may be the darkest, in fact, but it's also a new beginning in your career, a new beginning in your work life, a new beginning in what actions you're taking now. And there are some things to negotiate for sure here. Mercury and Venus are at the same degree for this new moon. But there's another key thing that's happening here, and that's Jupiter is stationing on the new moon on the 23rd of November in your 2nd sign, aspecting this new moon in your 10th sign. So there's definitely some negotiation going on here in terms of your speech, your work, your wealth, your earnings, or your savings, more so in terms of how that can impact what you do. So thinking about, Jupiter now as it stations direct in your 2nd house, and especially into the new year as Saturn moves into your sign, will be a good time in the next few months to save money. Saturn is no longer having an aspect onto Jupiter from January, and then Jupiter is left alone to move forward through Pisces until April. So January to April, definitely, I would set it, up as a time to really save a lot of money. And this new moon might be that starting point of whatever is happening in your career that could lead to that, because of the 10th house new moon. So key changes going on in November for you, Aquarius. Very positive changes going on, in fact. There are some adjustments that need to be made for sure, and you will have to negotiate a lot of the details. But ultimately, I think it's a more positive transition. And again, remember, it's always darkest before the dawn. So this is quite a dark time in many ways, but for you, it's I think a very important time of being more visible, in fact, with the sun moving into your 10th house in Scorpio. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time. Hello, Pisces. This is a forecast for Pisces rising and or moon sign for November 2022. So Pisces is a key transition happening in November, and that is Jupiter, your ruler, is about to station direct on the new moon on November 23rd. So this is an important transition for you and a key turning point in your life, really. Because this is the last time, of course, it will do this for 12 years. It's an important juncture in terms of things moving forward for you, in terms of your career prospects and all of that, because it's your 10th Lord, but also just personally in terms of your direction in life and who you are and how do you see yourself moving forward. And this can show actually how you can see yourself moving forward. And on the new moon on the 23rd, although it's a new moon in Scorpio in its debilitation sign, it's a dark moon and a debilitated moon. So it's definitely a dark time. It's actually from that dark time that you can have that sense of how you can move forward. So it's, as it said, it's always darkest before the dawn. This might be quite a dark time. And you from that then see how you can then clearly move forward. And I'm sure you've had experience of this plenty in your life where it's at that darkest time where you just shift your perspective of something and you realize actually maybe this is the way I need to go forward. And this could be the potentially what's happening in November. By the end of November, more so. The beginning of November is quite complex, especially the first week of November, because we're having now this eclipse period. From the 25th of October, we had an eclipse in Libra that was in your eighth sign of change and uncertainty. And then we're culminating with a total lunar eclipse in your second sign on November 8th. In your second sign, very much about stability and surety and safety. And Uranus and Rahu conjunct a totally eclipsed moon in Aries with Mars, the ruler, retrograde. There's nothing actually stable about this at all. It's a lot of changes going on. And of course, the key things that represent here, the second and eighth, are finances and family. Your family and your partner's family, and your finances, your partner's finances. A lot to negotiate here and a lot of changes that are possibly making you feel very uncertain about things and just unexpected changes happening in general. And then on top of that, then the lunar eclipse in your second sign, in this sign that's supposed to be all stable, where you have all of this kind of erratic change going on. So second sign is all about resources, finances, like your bank balance, things that make you feel safe, secure. And there's a big change going on here with Mars now also retrograde. So the first week of November leading to this total lunar eclipse is itself quite complex because all the planets here in your eighth sign are joining the south node Ketu. First, we have on the 3rd of November, Venus meet with Ketu. And then on the 6th, 7th, leading into the 8th and the eclipse, we have the Sun and Mercury. So there are a lot of things that you might have to just let go of, even if it's just letting go of the way you think things should be. There's, things happening in your home, maybe in your relationship, in your day-to-day routines, and in your plans and how you're going about getting what you want, how you're communicating. All of these things are changing. A lot of fundamental things changing in your life. And so leading up to this full moon here on the 8th, which is here, we can see it in your second sign, balancing out all of these considerations in one way, because the 8th sign is full of change, unexpected change. And the second sign is about like, okay, let me just steady the course here. But again, in another way, it might be quite imbalanced because of it being eclipsed, a total lunar eclipse. And so you might not see clearly at first, at least, how to move forward with this because it's your 5th Lord moon eclipsed in your second sign. How can I move forward with these plans, whether it's around my future plans in general or thinking about my children or anything like that, and my family dynamics and all of that, my financial situation, all of these things are having a big impact during this eclipse period. And because on top of all of that, if I show you a few days later, the moon joining Mars here, which is now stationed retrograde and started to move backwards, starting in your 4th house and eventually moving into your 3rd, there's a lot of things to renegotiate over the next few months. So it starts in your 4th, the home life. Mars retrograde in your 4th might feel like a bit frustrating if you're stuck at home, for example, or you want to get out and do something. And there are things to consider in terms of home life. And then by the 13th, we have a couple of interesting things happen. So let me move that back here. So it's your first sign. Okay, so first of all, we have Venus move in on the 11th, and then Mercury into Scorpio. Then on the 13th, we have Mars move back into Taurus. So it means that Mars and Venus are swapping signs, swapping the 3rd and 9th. This is actually a more positive indication overall, even though Mars retrograde itself could be, very frustrating in one way. Mars retrograde in your 3rd, certainly in communications, be mindful of that for the next few weeks until mid-January, because it's going to remain retrograde in your 3rd sign. But in November, because Venus is opposite, swapping signs with it, it could be a great time actually for you to rethink things, to really completely change the way you look at things and communicate what you believe to be true. Because what you believe to be true, of course, is going through so much change anyway, after having so much change. When unexpected change happens, I think it's important to actually see that, sometimes it's good to have change because it alters the way you see what is possible. And then as the planets file into your 9th house, including the sun, then by the 16th, and this exchange continues, and we're going to have a new moon here on the 23rd, this can really alter the way you see things and what is possible. And then how you communicate that with other people, even just with yourself. How do I say what I want? And what do I actually want? And what do I believe is possible? It's just saying it out or saying it to yourself initially is a very powerful thing to do. So the new moon then on the 23rd is a very important transition, because not only is it a new moon in your 9th house of what guides you, who guides you, or what beliefs guides you, and how you, again, communicate those beliefs, those thoughts, those ideas, and how you can maybe alter the way you communicate that to maybe shift your perceptions about these things. This new moon in your 9th house is so important. Because of that, it's like setting it up for like a new way of looking at things, setting up a new intention, a new way you could see things. But also because Jupiter is stationing on the day. Jupiter, your ruler, is stationing in Pisces, aspecting this new moon in your 9th. This is a really important transition for you, Pisces. It's a really important time, even though it might not seem that way initially. It's important. It's a major pivot point in the year for you, and it really for the last couple of years. So, and that's because Jupiter will start to move forward. And as it moves forward in Pisces, Saturn also moves forward and out of Capricorn and takes the pressure off, takes the restraint off as well. And so from January to April, as Jupiter continues to move forward through your sign, Pisces, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for expansion, for growth, but also professionally, it could be an opportunity that you haven't had in a while. And so this is a more positive situation overall. What you do have to just be mindful of in November still is the Saturn kind of hanging around in Capricorn in your 11th sign, aspecting your sign in a square to Uranus in your 2nd sign where the eclipse is. And this contrast and maybe even conflict between your financial situation and your earnings, and maybe, changes that have to happen in these areas, and, maybe dwindling of your earnings because of Saturn in the last couple of years, and then the changes that had to happen in your savings, that's 2nd sign. But again, because Saturn is now slowly moving out of that configuration and out of your 11th sign completely, it takes all that pressure off you as it moves into your 12th and off your sign and off your 11th sign. And you can start to think bigger. You can start to think, okay, I can start to earn more even, but also Saturn moving into your 12th is a better place for Saturn in a way to just end certain things, to finish out something, and it's a key ending point in your life in some way. But again, the 11th house then, although itself is going through its own changes in the long term with Pluto, it's a better time for you to be able to think big. Saturn in the 11th doesn't always allow us to think big, though it might help us to work hard. It kind of puts a lid on what we think is possible. And when it's in the 11th, it aspects the 1st, your sign. So you might literally physically feel sort of like not being able to expand, to grow, to do things that you want to do. So November is a key turning point, in other words, for this configuration that's been hanging around in the air for the last 2 years. So on top of everything else, with Jupiter moving and course as well in November. It's an important month, I believe, for you, Pisces. And during this new moon on the 23rd, this is, I think, an important time to really acknowledge that shift. Even if it doesn't seem obvious, even though it might seem like a really dark time, in many ways it is. The new moon in Scorpio is a dark time of the year. But in that dark time, it's always darkest before the dawn. Just remember that it's a key turning point. So, Pisces, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time.